Marijuana, the devil's harvest, the assassin of youth. Good kids quickly go bad. This was the portrayal of pot for nearly a century. Long touted as the smoke of hell responsible for violent and psychotic behavior. Many researchers believe it to be relatively benign, yet it remains illicit and demonized in much of the world. Today, marijuana has never been more valuable or potent. Law enforcement fights it.
Gentlemen.
Cannabis clubs flourish. And obsessed agriculturalists are perfecting its botany. Breathe deep. This is not your father's marijuana. If a stranger walked up to you and poured pebble-like seeds in your hand, then said, plant them, and your harvest can be made into rope, cloth, or paper. It could help the sick or intoxicate. What would you say? Would you keep the seeds? Or chuck them away? So it is with marijuana. A plant like no other. The scientific name is Cannabis sativa. We know it as pot, weed, ganja, hemp. Its ability to intoxicate makes it vilified, illegal, and desired. An estimated 200 million people around the world smoke it. 2 million Americans alone will try it this year, making marijuana the most widely used illicit substance in the world. And it's everywhere. Growers, smugglers, and dealers do whatever it takes to get their product to the customer. And now, they've invaded national lands, planting marijuana gardens hidden in the forests.
We have 2 suspects who are out in the woods somewhere. We're using
the illegal cultivation of marijuana on public lands in California is what I would call in a crisis mode. Every time we go out and look, we find more than we did the time before.
Ron Pugh has been enforcing laws in U.S. forests for 29 years.
It is the most dangerous thing that we Forest Service law enforcement engage in.
Armed men are holed up, protecting illegal crops. Because of that, entering some state and national parks can be dangerous for law enforcement and civilians alike. This is a joint operation between U.S. Forest Service and several other law enforcement agencies. The mission is to identify, then raid an illegal marijuana garden. An action that happened over 700 times in the last 2 years in California alone.
The top of this ridge line over here, we'll go over the top and then we're
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, okay.
He says, look straight down in the trees right down here. See the brown surface?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the garden.
See the dead tree and all the sprouts?
Yep, I see it exactly.
See the water rings down below us?
Yep, I see it.
The other garden.
Oh, yeah. We don't want to spend a lot of time here,
No,
though.
we want to bug out of here.
Okay, right back
Right there.
See the shadow? Shadow? Shadow now.
All right, we're out of here.
The team must now plan an approach to raid the garden. It's a 3-hour covert hike over rugged terrain. Growers plant marijuana to make money, and there's a lot of money to be made. 20 years ago, much of the pot in the U.S. was smuggled in by people willing to risk it all. People like Todd Steele.
The profile of people who smoke pot is basically everybody. Doctors smoke pot, attorneys smoke pot, real estate agents smoke pot, Hippies smoke pot, and conservative people who go to church every single Sunday smoke pot too.
Steele was a big-time pot smuggler.
From buying 10, 15 pounds of pot to sell in high school, I started recognizing that I can buy 100 pounds of pot and 1,000 pounds of pot and a ton of pot and 20 tons of pot.
A skilled sailor, he began to crew on sailboats, doing runs to Colombia.
I just sort of worked my way up the ladder until I made all the right contacts, and by the time I was 17 years old, I was down in Colombia doing 20-ton loads.
But the Todd Steele way of doing business, smuggling pot over international borders, is being challenged. Today, as borders tighten, the high-seas smuggler might just as likely be a neighborhood grower.
We've been working this guy for like 3 months now. He doesn't have a job, he doesn't go anywhere. He drives a black F450, and he also has a white Hummer. Obviously, the guy's been identified as a grower.
Here in Florida, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency has busted over 750 homes in the past 9 months. Suburban homes converted into greenhouses, indoor growing operations known as grow-ops. It's a record year.
In the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen a great phenomenon of indoor marijuana grows, and that's all around the country. And unfortunately, it has grown quite a bit in the state of Florida to the point where we've actually become the top indoor producer of marijuana in the United States.
Behind a door, 44 plants are discovered. A moderate-sized grow worth about $150,000. Many gardens like this go undetected. Moreover, gardeners can now bypass Mother Nature. Weather and geography are no longer relevant. With all this control comes near-perfect plants. And with that perfection comes a stronger product. The psychoactive compound that alters one's consciousness is called tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. And today's marijuana can potentially have a lot of it.
This is not 60s marijuana anymore. We're finding marijuana with a THC content in the 20s, 20 percentile. In the 20 percentile, we're talking back in the 60s and 70s of 3, 4% THC. Now we're in the 20s. This is very potent stuff now. It's all about making money. And when you grow indoors, you can have 3 to 4 harvests a year. If you take an average of about 1 pound a plant here in the streets of Miami, that's $35,000 to $4,000 a pound. Take that to New York, for example, and you're talking about $7,000 a pound.
In 2005, the U.S. State Department estimates nearly 10 million kilos of marijuana were produced indoors and out. Some assessments have it displacing corn as the leading cash crop in America. So as much as the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency would like to see these operations go away, they're not. Everywhere around the world, this plant has its warriors. People who make a living from it, and activists who believe that criminal marijuana laws are wrong. This is Mark Emery, the Prince of Pot.
We are at war with the DEA. We are at war with the U.S. Department of Justice.
This is the largest global marijuana march in the world today with 250 cities. We've got possibly 20,000 people here today.
He's an internationally famous crusader for pot legalization.
We need to have a lot of pot. And we need to have millions and millions of people growing this pot. And we need to be able to make the governments waste lots of money tracking all this pot down so that no matter how much pot they burn, there's still lots of pot. That would be a good one. Now,
Emery has agreed to take us to a place no television crew has been before. The largest indoor marijuana garden he's ever seen. Sam Malache grows marijuana.
How you doing, boys?
In 2001, Canada became the first country to institute a nationwide medical marijuana law. That means that a select group of people can legally grow and use cannabis. Malache is licensed to grow marijuana for himself and 2 other people. His grow house is a glimpse of what an industrialized marijuana operation could look like if it were to become legal. Here, a state-of-the-art hydroponic system fortifies 300 plants, allowing Malache to be a one-man environmental system.
I never grew marijuana up until 6 years ago. Never grew it before in my life.
Malache's grow op exemplifies the sophistication that pot growers have achieved in both cultivation and cross-pollination, creating perfect plants.
I like the highest THC content that I can.
Malache is growing some of the strongest pot available today. The leaves and stems end up on the compost pile. These budding flowers are the prize, holding nearly 18% levels of psychoactive THC. This is a lot of pot for 3 people, but Malache insists he's manufacturing medicine, not pot to simply get you high.
My objective here is to show people, educate them as to other alternatives for pain relief, not cures, pain relief.
A bad car accident left Malache in chronic pain. A bevy of prescribed painkillers took a toll on his liver. That's when he entered Health Canada's marijuana program, making his own medication, specifically THC-laced butter.
The plan I'm putting into place is to manufacture butter, marijuana butter, which can be put into food products that people can absorb. Then what we do here at the farm, once it's steamed and cured, this is what comes out. No leaf, no powder, just straight old butter. And from the butter, we end up making cookies, different types. There's butterscotch, different types of granola bars.
This is used like any pure organic butter.
Containing THC.
Depending on the amount of THC, it may have a slight earthy flavor of marijuana.
In it, and marijuana, this is considered a medication now. I don't have pain. If I do, I'll have a cookie. Compare it. Now, what would people sooner want? Would they want the pills, or would they sooner have a cookie to get the same relief?
Pretty unique stuff, and smells spectacular. Incredibly
That's
pungent and.
That's all trichome.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
By all accounts, Malache's plants are perfect. And perfect plants begin with perfect seeds. Search the internet and you'll find seed catalogs with hundreds of types of cannabis. BC Bud, Jock Horror, White Rhino, Wonder Woman, 4-Way, Afghan. These are just a few of the pure strains of today's pot. Combinations of cannabis for a body high or a head high. Cross-pollinated to meet specific growing conditions and THC levels. Like grapes for a vineyard, they're sold to connoisseur growers searching for the consummate plant. It's a global trend.
Police officers, come down and open the door!
Some of the strongest pot is grown in England.
Police officers, open the door!
4 times every week for the past 7 months, England's Manchester Police raid residential grow-ops.
It's basically an office block what's been converted into a residential address. There is a large garage at the side which we believe is a commercial cannabis factory. If we get no response, we will force entry. Any questions at this stage?
In 2004, the United Kingdom loosened the penalties for marijuana possession, and criminal gangs have stepped up supply.
What drugs are on the premises, pal?
The new weed of choice here is called skunk.
In previous years, we had cannabis coming from traditional routes such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Morocco. We've got very much a picture now that's developing of homegrown cannabis, often referred to as skunk, which is more potent. In fact, it's between 30 and 50% more potent.
Skunk is so strong, it's claimed to have brought on schizophrenia-like symptoms to some users.
I'm not a scientist, nor do I suggest that I have a scientific knowledge, but any reading of the scientific journals, there is a common pattern emerging of a view that there is a direct correlation between long-term cannabis misuse and, of course, mental illness, schizophrenia being just one of the diseases.
The lengths people will go in order to cultivate and sell this product is a testament to the plant itself. It is desired by so many, but why? Cannabis has been used as an intoxicant for 5,000 years, first in China. Smoke held in the lungs enters the bloodstream through a network of capillaries. The blood quickly enters the brain, where THC binds to receptors. The first hints of intoxication can be felt within 10 seconds, but no one will experience it the same way. Most commonly, time slows to the user. Space appears vast. Sexuality, spirituality, and the senses all appear enhanced. Euphoria increases, but use can also lead to anxiousness, paranoia, abnormal heart rhythms, and a general sense of uneasiness. Long-term use has also been linked with memory loss, respiratory problems, depression, and adverse impacts on schoolwork and job performance. But the demand remains high, and profits too.
Basically, everybody understood that if we were all trustworthy, good people doing good business honestly, we would all make a lot of money. And the best way to do it was to keep it quiet and keep it low-key and, and share the wealth. As an outlaw, I saw the laws that I was breaking as being laws that weren't fair, because drugs are sold in America legally every day, with every sale of alcohol, with every beer that's sold, with every bottle of vodka that's sold, with every fancy bottle of wine that's sold. Americans are dealing drugs.
At age 26, Steele quit the smuggling business with no regrets. 7 years later, one last run got him arrested. He served a 12-month sentence. He was lucky. But there was a time that marijuana would not have gotten you jailed. In colonial Virginia, many households grew cannabis for industrial purposes: rope, cloth, and paper. They called it hemp. Today in Virginia, 2 plants could get you 5 to 30 years imprisonment. The first U.S. law against marijuana use passed in Texas in 1914. Mexican immigrants escaping civil war poured over the border, bringing their local weed with them. Social conservatives rallied. By 1937, cannabis was illegal throughout America. Pot moved underground. In the 1970s, on the heels of the hippie era, President Jimmy Carter endorsed a nationwide decriminalization. But President Ronald Reagan agreed with conservative outcries that marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug in the world.
And today, more arrests are being made and more narcotics are being seized than ever before.
And America's first drug czar went after the marijuana business with unprecedented zeal and a blank check from the White House. Today, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency classifies marijuana alongside heroin as a Schedule I drug, meaning the harshest drug penalties apply and are enforced. U.S. law enforcement spends billions of dollars a year to combat it. Over 800,000 Americans were arrested last year because of it, almost 90% of them for simple possession. These types of arrests, along with mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes you're out laws, have added to an already overburdened prison system. Now, a hugely controversial loophole is pitting state rights against U.S. federal government. They are medical marijuana laws. California was the first U.S. state to pass a medical marijuana law in 1996. The intent was to give relief to deathly ill patients, those suffering from advanced stages of HIV/AIDS and cancer. People like Robin Few.
The doctor took one look at me. He said, "You have lymphoma." Within a couple hours, had me in the hospital, and within a few days, I was doing chemo. So I was shocked. You know, I never thought of cancer. You know, how you don't plan on cancer.
A vigorous and active life has been stopped with chemotherapy sessions.
Hey.
Hello, Dr. Abrams.
How are you doing?
Her oncologist is Don Abrams, who for the past 28 years has seen firsthand how marijuana helps his patients.
Deep breath for me. Cannabis is the only drug that decreases nausea and vomiting and also increases appetite. Mouth open. Also, I think people sleep better, and a little bit of euphoria I don't find is a negative thing in people that are facing malignant diagnoses.
With Abrams' recommendation, Few uses a vaporizer. It heats up the pot, releasing a gas, which is gentler than smoke.
But the best part is yet to come. See, there's all this vapor in there. Takes a little while, can sit around and smoke on this baggie for a little while. I never have nausea. I'm hungry all the time. You know, I feel like the more cannabis that I smoke, the less of the narcotics that I take. So that's been really helpful to me. They say I look better than I've looked in 2 years, and that freaks me out because I'm dying of cancer, you know.
Shamans, physicians, and pharmacists have dabbled in the notion of marijuana as medicine for thousands of years. But the relief patients feel is largely anecdotal. Marijuana's status as a Schedule I drug means that according to the federal government, it has no accepted medical use. The U.S. government strictly controls all American marijuana studies, and researchers who want to study cannabis must obtain it from this facility at the University of Mississippi. By some accounts, the supply is extremely limited and of questionable quality. And some scientists claim that if their research might show potential positive medical uses, the requests are rejected. It's a charge the government denies. But in other nations, getting cannabis to scientists is less complicated. Israel is among the leaders in medical marijuana research. From his lab bench in Jerusalem, Raphael Meshulam has fathered nearly 2 generations of peer-reviewed medical research. He first discovered THC in 1964.
Cannabis, although it had been investigated, nobody had really isolated it in pure form, and neither were all the other compounds there. So I thought that it's high time that somebody should do that.
For 40 years at Hebrew University, researchers study effects of THC and other cannabinoids on people and laboratory animals. Meshulam dissolves THC in an oil-based solution. In this form, measured doses can be administered accurately. Researchers here have witnessed promising results in the treatments of brain trauma, diabetes, cancers, and osteoporosis. 20-year-old Eyal Preisler underwent a bone marrow transplant a year and a half ago. Since then, his body experiences a chronic quasi-rejection called graft-versus-host disease.
I am treated by the THC drops for 2 months already, meaning that I just started and I already saw changes. Whether it's the digestive system, the diarrhea that is gone, and my skin that was very hard is now softer and back to its original state. My appetite is back. It really increased the appetite, and I actually gained 4 kilos in the past 2 months. I need to gain a lot more weight to get back to where I was.
Each dose that Eyal takes is as measured as any prescribed medicine. Most marijuana taken as medicine in America is not.
Medical marijuana in the States means use of marijuana against diseases. Now, from my point of view, medical marijuana is not well defined. It should be better defined. If you take aspirin, you want to take 500 milligrams of aspirin. You don't want to say, well, I don't know how much I'm getting, 20 milligrams or 2 grams. I don't see any difference why one should have a different attitude when working with marijuana. And if marijuana can have anything between 2% and 20% THC, I don't think that this is the right way to do it.
American medical marijuana laws are not well defined. Advocates say that today in California, there are more than 200,000 physician-sanctioned pot smokers and nearly 300 dispensaries. U.S. federal law enforcement believes this creates an atmosphere of overly permissive use and quasi-legalization.
How you doing today?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Good, thanks.
I was looking for something that could help me with sleeping.
Okay, well, you'd want to go with your most indica, and these are our 3 high grades.
Which one would you recommend?
I like to go for buds and less stem, so I'd go with that nice one right there.
Okay.
$150 and a brief examination could get you a physician's recommendation for medical marijuana in California.
All right. You're all set. Thank you.
The medical use laws change from county to county and from town to town. In California's Bay Area, Oakland is perhaps the most tolerant. Here in the shadow of City Hall is a 9-square-block area newly dubbed as Oaksterdam. Richard Lee is affectionately known as the mayor of Oaksterdam.
Hey, guys. Hey, Carl.
A broken back left him in a wheelchair 18 years ago. He uses and advocates medical marijuana, seeing it as more than just medicine for the body.
Won their first softball game this last week. Yeah, he's our star shortstop, right?
We saw this area of Oakland that needed revitalization, just very run down, a lot of empty storefronts. And so we saw that the cannabis industry, the cannabis businesses could work in this area and help improve it and bring economy back to the area.
According to Lee, the gross sales of medical marijuana in Oaksterdam were over $24 million in 2003, meaning nearly $3 million in sales tax would have been added to city coffers. But under U.S. federal law, the growing, selling, and use of marijuana is illegal, and federal law trumps state and local laws. So despite widespread popularity, there is still a conflict.
DEA does not make the laws. We do not make the laws, we enforce the laws.
Javier Pena is a 24-year veteran in the war against drugs. He's in charge of the DEA's San Francisco Field Division.
Any form of marijuana selling, growing, possessing, cultivating, whatever you want to do, it is very simple. Under federal law, it is all illegal.
Well, they have closed down quite a few clubs, and it has been somewhat of a setback, a counterattack, but I think we're holding strong, and that time, will win out.
We don't go after the terminally ill, the person out there that's sick, dying. We don't go after that. We don't go after the guy who's smoking out in the street corner. We go after the organizations that are supplying this illegal narcotics.
And that includes dispensaries. To help people stay out of trouble with authorities, Lee invented Oaksterdam University.
The first classes you will be required to take are politics and legal issues.
Wait a second. Hey, are you a cop?
Hey, what the hell?
Stand up.
Hey, man.
Under arrest.
Is this entrapment?
We have lawyers come in and talk about what the laws are and aren't.
How you doing, ma'am?
Oh, hi.
You're high?
Profiling is entirely legal, okay? There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it.
Then we move on to cooking, hash making, bud tending.
Just above those nodes, you cut at a 45-degree angle.
We have a can of business to learn how to start a dispensary or production facility.
Lee's business may all be illegal according to the feds, but some Oakland elected officials and citizens believe Oaksterdam is working.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
So we pay payroll taxes, health insurance for employees, everything that other businesses do.
Head on, man. Head on back.
We have a very good relationship with the other merchants. They know that we bring in a lot of business. We create a lot of traffic.
So what are you looking for today?
Okay.
We've got our hashes on the front page. Second page is our medium grade and low grade 1-star, our $11 puppy bag. We also have high grades on the back page, 44 for an eighth. Champagne's our best in the house today. Anything else for you?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you,
man.
guys.
Have a good night.
Since they've allowed us to be able to have a marijuana card and purchase marijuana from a safe environment, it's really helped rather than trying to purchase marijuana out on the streets and where it's really hectic and it's dangerous. I mean, you're terrified from the people that you purchase it from because you don't really know them off the streets, and you have to deal with the situation if you get caught with the police and that kind of thing. So this has made it much more convenient and civilized.
3 high grades.
Being prosecuted or being investigated by federal government is always a concern.
I can help. Who's next?
For me, it's worth it to be involved and hopefully be helping Oakland patients as much as possible.
Papers in there for you?
It's worth the risk for me.
Since 1996, 11 other American states have passed similar compassionate use laws. This trend has changed the business of marijuana in America. The heartland of pot cultivation is upstate California, in the Emerald Triangle of Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity counties. California grows more pot than any other state in America, with a reputation for superior quality. And the revenues far outpace the California wine industry. This is where hippie growers took root decades ago, subverting the law and supplying weed to America. A marijuana farmer has invited us to his plot, a rare opportunity. The growers here remain highly secretive and suspicious of any strangers. There is too much at risk. Federal agents can seize crops. Patch pirates can steal them. Loss of freedom, loss of profits. We've agreed to hide this farmer's identity.
I've been growing weed since '79, that's 30 years. Oh, it's great. It's turned me into a farmer.
This does not appear like a farm in the traditional sense. There are no clear cultivated rows, no wide vistas, no heavy machinery. Just potted plants seeking out sun among the native pines. But the horticulture is as earnest and sophisticated as any mainstream farmers.
Starting the seeds in February. And then it's the whole process. The hot summer, looking for sun, hoping for sun. And then there's always the steps, the harvesting, the drying, the packaging, then the more lucrative side of things, hopefully. It's, it's a great way to have an income. Oh.
The value of the U.S. marijuana crop has increased sharply in the past 10 years. Some believe it's because of medical marijuana use. One assessment puts the 2006 California crop at 22 million plants, a tenfold increase from just 15 years before.
These have got to go today. Oh, I'm under pressure.
It's early autumn. These plants are ready for harvest.
See all the brown?
In a week, they'll be ready for market.
It wants to go, and there's ways to tell when it's ready. You can see the crystals. I don't know if you could get it on your camera. We're in a kind of a pressurized situation because of the forthcoming rain.
Today, some pot farms are multi-generational, with grown children going into the family business.
I never thought it would get to this. It's getting better all the time.
And the family business may one day be legitimate as marijuana laws change, though it remains illegal today. The simple rules of supply and demand are at work here, and the demand is met by most any means possible, like growing crops on public land.
California far exceeds the rest of the country added up. I think something like 75% of what we find is in the state of California.
Here in Sequoia National Forest, the raid of the illegal garden spotted days before is underway. One team drops down from the helicopter to meet up with agents already hiking in. Almost 2 million plants were seized on public lands in 2007. More than 250,000 in Sequoia alone. The terrain is rugged and steep. Footing is difficult. And they never know what they may encounter.
Could be anywhere from 2 to 4 people, depending on how big the site is. You know, we definitely got to be careful with these guys. They're usually armed and dangerous.
After about 100 meters, the team comes to the clearing. There is a newly planted plot, which is a good thing.
I'm going to say a week to 2 weeks at the most. You come back here 3 months from now, if we hadn't come in like this, these plants would be 4 or 5 foot tall. Maybe 4 months from now, they'd be 6 foot tall, budded out. This place would be trashed. This is one of 6 plots in this particular cultivation site.
Nearly 4,700 young plants are growing in these 6 plots. If they reach maturity, these seedlings may have yielded over 2 tons of marijuana. The gardeners have fled, but the damage is done. A cleared forest, irrigation tubing, terraced land, and toxic illegal fertilizers add up to an environmental tragedy.
This isn't about drugs for us. This is about an incredible amount of resource, environmental damage that's going on. That is, if the average citizen saw what we see on a daily basis, they would be outraged as we are.
The Forest Service does its best, but most sites go unrestored due to a lack of resources.
There's 2 threats to these people, 3 really. The police is just probably the least of their worries. They're worried about pirates, pot pirates, we call them, people stealing their crop, and then critters, the various animals that'll feed on that stuff.
Growers operate on a simple principle. They plant 5 gardens. 2 will get seized. Animals will eat 1, and the 2 that survive will make millions. Who runs these operations is still a mystery.
The logical assumption is, since most of the growers are coming from Mexico, that's where the money's going back to. We do have some intelligence that takes us there, but for the most part, I'd have to say we don't know.
The U.S. Forest Service estimates that there are at least 3,000 armed foreign nationals growing marijuana on public lands in California alone.
Was there any firearms in here?
The public threat here is real. Hikers are warned to be on the lookout for men potentially armed and dangerous.
We're talking about a very systematic, organized criminal activity being conducted throughout the West Coast anyway, on our public lands, by organized crime. These folks almost all are armed, and it's very real danger. We had 5 fatalities last year in the state of California, so it's an extreme public safety issue.
The growers here in Sequoia are brazen. The Emerald Triangle farmers feel these gardens draw too much unwanted federal attention to their operations. But they both make profits. They both take risks. There seems to be no end in sight. American laws force the casual and habitual pot user alike to be careful. Depending on the circumstances and where one is caught with marijuana, one could receive a slap on the wrist or serious jail time. In Canada, it's illegal too, but the laws are less severely enforced. Here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Mark Emery is creating his vision of a pot lover's utopia, a place wholly devoted to a pot-smoking way of life, and something he'd like to see worldwide.
The selection has really increased here.
According to the UN, Canada has the highest number of pot smokers in the industrialized world, and Vancouver is the center.
Kosher salt, best thing, you use a few cents worth of that, 3 cents worth of isopropyl alcohol, and about 3 cents worth of salt. And it takes the grit and resin off this bong within 5 seconds.
Emery can be found in this 4-story emporium, a wonderland that sells everything a pothead would ever need, except the pot.
Thank you, sir. Everything in this store is about cannabis. Every single hat, thing, wallet, every book about marijuana that's currently available we like to have. We have many people we know who have 15 to 20 different bongs because they're works of art. They're all handmade. This is kind of Mecca. This is where people come to kind of hopefully steal our ideas.
Upstairs, for $5 Canadian, patrons bring their own stash to the cannabis version of a cocktail lounge.
Hello again. I cleaned my bong especially for this occasion. So, brought you, plus there's some very killer bud in here. So here we go. Almost. If I were a person who had never had marijuana before, how would you describe the effect of getting high today? So relaxed, comfortable. I think if you're straight and unhappy, you should look at the pot people. I think we set a good example for ourselves. But here's the cool thing about pot. How you're perceiving it in your head is changing. So I guess if a straight person would come and go, what the heck is going on here? It's Sunday. And it's like better than any other environment, right? And anybody can come here. And yet people love to do that. They had the hippie cafe, but then the cops came and said, you can't do this anymore. And it just was over. And so he hit the ground. And you know, my bong was here. I know my memory, you know. Ah, there it is.
Downstairs in Emery's cannabis empire is Pot TV. A website devoted to marijuana growers, users, and activists. The magazine Cannabis Culture, with a monthly circulation 40,000 strong, is his flagship.
Okay, good. Okay, great.
The glossy magazine promotes what is close to Emery's heart. Beautiful buds and beautiful women. This doesn't seem like a normal day at the office for most of us.
I'll be here for another 12 hours, and I started around 10 o'clock. I had to see my bail supervisor at 9:30 this morning, so it'll be a long day, but they're all going to be long days until I get this magazine to the printer. For people like these visitors, I want them to go away thinking, hey, we should do that where we live, and so that they imitate me.
We're here! We're high! Get used to it!
Emery has funded his global activism by selling marijuana seeds internationally over the internet, reportedly making millions of dollars. He says he's paid taxes on every penny.
I have sold millions of seeds. Millions of seeds. And I had a very good reason for selling those seeds. I wanted to defeat the U.S. government's war on drugs.
We did raise a lot of money, and then we gave it all away, including to over $1 million to people in the United States, as well as millions in Canada and around the world to subsidize a mass movement to try and get marijuana legalized.
Many nations tolerate recreational marijuana use. Most famously, in 1976, the Netherlands stopped enforcing bans on the possession and sale of small amounts of pot. Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Belgium also adopted more tolerant stances. But in January of '09, the UK plans on tightening their marijuana laws. And under US federal law, there is no difference between selling a seed or selling pot. And this is why Emery is among America's most wanted. The government wants him extradited, but Canada will not oblige. If extradited to the US, Emery could face years in a federal prison.
Excellent. I'm flattered to be thought of so highly by the U.S. Justice Department that they would use such hyperbole and describe me as a villain. I have returned.
The worldview of controversial.
I'm not proud of the fact that I broke laws in my country. I was in a business selling a substance that is the same as alcohol. And I would like personally to be able to live with pride that what I do is not something I should be ashamed of.
As long as there's trafficking organizations working out there, marijuana, coke, heroin, meth, we're going to go after them.
Life seems to be very complicated in every place of the world. Most of us are anxious from time to time. Most of us are depressed from time to time. We want to change that. And in many cases, such a change can be brought forward by cannabis, so that's why people use it, that's all.
One thing is certain. Much cannabis today has no resemblance to the plant of our ancestors. This weed, a proverbial sow's ear of yesterday's cannabis, has become a silk purse. So, would you keep the seeds now?